So, let's talk about Baruch Spinoza's masterpiece, The Ethics. Now, this isn't your typical dusty old philosophy book. No way. It's more like a detailed, logical blueprint for the entire universe. And that includes the most complicated thing in it, us. So today, we're going to build his radical vision of reality, piece by piece, from the ground up.
But before we dive in, let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like you're just tossed around by your emotions? Anger, jealousy, desire, like you're a ship in a storm and you're not really at the helm? Well, if you do, Spinoza would say, yeah, you're not alone. In fact, he argues that most of us are living in a state he calls human bondage, completely controlled by forces we don't even see. But here's the good news. He also drew us a map to a very, very unique kind of freedom. So how do we get there? All right, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at Spinoza's unique method, his architectural style, if you will. Then, we'll lay down the single most important foundation for his entire system, a totally radical idea of God. And from that one starting point, you'll see how it completely changes everything, how we understand the mind, our emotions, and what it actually means to be free.
Okay, let's get into it. First stop, the blueprint itself. You see, Spinoza wasn't just jotting down some interesting ideas. He was a true architect of thought. And just like any good architect, he picked a very specific and incredibly powerful tool to build his entire vision of reality. What he used is what's called the geometrical method. Seriously, think of it like a geometry textbook, but for reality itself. He starts with just a few basic definitions and axioms. Ideas he says are just self-evident. And from there, he builds this airtight case, a series of inescapable logical proofs about God, the mind, and human life. It's kind of wild, because if you accept his starting points, you're pretty much locked into his conclusions. So what's that big foundational idea at the very heart of it all? Well, that brings us right to the bedrock, the absolute single most important building block of his entire system. It's this concept he calls substance, and let's just say he radically redefines it as God. So what in the world is a substance in Spinoza's language? Okay, think of it as the ultimate independent reality. It doesn't need anything else to exist. It doesn't need anything else to be understood. It's not created by something else. No, it's its own cause and its own explanation. A total self-starter. So you have to ask, what could possibly fit that description? And right here, this is the revolutionary leap. This is the move that changed everything. Spinoza argues very logically that there can only be one such substance. Just one. Why? Well, think about it. If there were two, they'd have to limit each other, right? And if they limit each other, then neither one could be truly infinite or truly independent. So, logically, there can only be one. A single, infinite, self-caused substance that is the foundation of, well, all of reality. He lays it out plain as day in Proposition 14. He says, besides God, no substance can be granted or conceived. That's it. For Spinoza, God is this single, all-encompassing substance. And the implication of this, it's just staggering. It means that you, me, the planet, the stars, we aren't actually separate things. We are all what Spinoza calls modes. We're just different expressions or modifications of that one single substance. This is where he gets his famous idea of God, or nature, Deus sive Natura. They're just two different words for the exact same thing, the one single, self-creating, totally unified system of reality. Okay, so we've laid the foundation, one single substance, which we can call God, or nature. Now, the next piece of our blueprint is to see how this foundation just completely demolishes and rebuilds our idea of what a self even is. I mean, if everything is part of one unified system, what does that do to that classic old idea of the mind and body being separate? For centuries, the main view, thanks mostly to guys like Descartes, was dualism. The idea that the mind is some non-physical thinking thing, and the body is just a physical machine, the whole ghost in the machine thing. Well, Spinoza comes along and just throws that entire idea right out the window. He argues that thought, the mind, and extension, the body, aren't separate things at all. Nope, they're just two different attributes, two different ways of looking at the one and only substance. So what does that mean? It means your mind and your body are not two separate things trying to talk to each other. They are the exact same thing, just seen from two different angles. Think of it like a coin, right? One side is heads, that's the body. The other side is tails, that's the mind. But it's all still just one coin. So whatever happens in your body is instantly expressed as an idea in your mind and the other way around. Because, well, they're fundamentally one and the same. Now, this whole mind-body unity thing, it leads to one of Spinoza's most controversial conclusions. And honestly, for a lot of people, it's pretty unsettling. Because if the mind and body are one, and the body is part of the physical world, well, that means the mind also has to follow nature's unbreakable laws of cause and effect.
So for Spinoza, the whole idea of a free will that can just stand outside the chain of cause and effect, it's just an illusion. We feel free, sure, because we're aware of what we want. But what we're not aware of is the vast, incredibly complex chain of causes that made us want that thing in the first place. Every single thought, every action is just another link in an infinite chain of causes, like one domino knocking over the next, forever.
I know, this deterministic view might sound a little grim, but believe it or not, it's actually the foundation for Spinoza's whole psychology. It's his explanation for why we so often feel like we're not in the driver's seat, why we feel like we're in bondage to our emotions. See, Spinoza's definition of emotion is brilliantly simple. It's actually very physical. For him, an emotion isn't some mysterious, spooky force. It's just two things. First, there's a change in your body's power to act. It either increases or decreases. And second, there's your mind's awareness of that change. That's it. That's an emotion. Let's break it down step by step. He calls a reactive emotion a passion because we're passive in it. It's something that happens to us. So let's say you smell some amazing freshly baked bread. Okay, that external thing affects your body. It increases its power, its vitality. Your mind perceives that shift, and you experience that perception as the emotion of pleasure. See? We're just reacting to the world around us. And that is what he calls human bondage. It's being tossed back and forth by the waves of what's happening outside of us, feeling happy when something good happens to us, feeling sad when something bad happens to us, all without really understanding the true reasons why. And in that state, he says, we are not free. Not at all.
But here's the thing. Spinoza does not leave us stranded there, stuck in that bondage. The whole final part of his blueprint is dedicated to showing us the path out. A path toward a really profound kind of freedom that he calls blessedness.
The key, the secret to moving from being passive to being active, from bondage to freedom, is knowledge. It's that simple. When we have what he calls inadequate ideas, it's like seeing only one domino fall, but you have no clue what hit it. You just react blindly. But when we start to form adequate ideas, we see the whole chain of dominoes. We understand the real causes of things, and that includes our own emotions. And that understanding is what transforms us from just passive reactors into active agents in our own lives. And this leads him to a totally radical redefinition of what freedom even is. It's not some magical power to break the laws of cause and effect, no. For Spinoza, real freedom is self-knowledge. It's the deep, profound understanding of that whole web of causes that makes you you. Once you get that, your actions start to come from the necessity of your own nature, instead of just blind reactions to whatever's happening around you. Now, the highest form of this understanding, the peak of the mountain, is what Spinoza calls the intellectual love of God. And let's be clear, this isn't some mushy, emotional, worshipful kind of love. It's a state of pure, rational insight. It's seeing yourself and everything else as a necessary and logical part of the eternal order of nature. This kind of understanding, that's the ultimate goal. It's a state of profound peace and contentment, what he calls blessedness, that just comes from seeing and accepting reality exactly as it is. When we finally understand our necessary place within the huge, grand structure of nature, we're no longer just tossed around by the waves of fortune. And that, for Spinoza, is what real freedom feels like. Let's just end with this really powerful, stark contrast from Spinoza himself. The person who lives in ignorance, he says, is fragile. Their very sense of self just kind of flickers on and off with the winds of fortune. But the person who achieves this deep understanding, they gain a kind of eternal perspective, a stable tranquility that's the ultimate reward of using your reason. So I guess the question Spinoza's blueprint leaves us with is this: are we content to just be a reaction, or are we going to do the hard work to become a cause?